In America, there is a strange feeling that is difficult to explain in numbers. You drive through one neighborhood and everything looks richer than ever. Fresh facades, neat sidewalks, new coffee shops, brunch lines, cars are more expensive, storefronts are brighter, even the air seems more expensive. And then you turn down just a couple of streets and see a different America. For Lease. On the glass, an empty store that used to be a pharmacy, a store closing sign, a parking lot with no cars and a silence that doesn't feel like peace. It's like life is slowly leaving this place. And here's the paradox. Why do some neighborhoods look richer when most people say it's harder for them? Why does the rich picture become brighter at the exact moment when the feeling of poverty becomes widespread? Because America now lives at two speeds. And this is not a metaphor. This is the real economy which has ceased to be uniform. Most people are looking for one reason, one guilty person, one explanation to make it easier. But it works differently. It's not a single hit. This is a system that rebuilds the flows of money, convenience, security, and work, and adds them up not everywhere in the same way. Therefore, in one place you see growth and a new normal, and in another you see a quiet contraction. And the most dangerous thing about this process is that it doesn't look like a crisis. It looks like a difference in lighting. It's bright there, dim here, and you get used to it, until you realize that this is a different world. Let's start with the simplest scene that almost anyone will recognize. You go to the bank's app and everything seems to be fine. The salary has arrived, the figure calms you down for a second. And then you scroll down and see that the money is no longer yours. They are distributed in advance. Insurance, utilities, rent or mortgage, car, phone, subscriptions that you promised to cancel, but they keep the rest of your usual life. And then comes a small notification. Payment increased. Not dramatic, not twice, just higher. And a new reality kicks in. It's going to be crowded again this month. This is where the key is born. People think that rich neighborhoods have become richer because there are rich people there. Partially, yes, but the real reason is deeper. At a time when the majority of financial margins are disappearing, wealth begins to look brighter simply because it is the only one with a margin left. Margin is not a luxury. This is freedom. This is an opportunity not to count every little thing. This is a right to make mistakes. When the margin is there, an unexpected bill is annoying. When there is no margin, an unexpected invoice changes plans. And if millions of families live in the how to survive mode, then the areas where people live in the how to improve mode begin to stand out sharply. Because, rich district, these aren't just expensive homes. This is the infrastructure of convenience. They pay for speed, service, quality, security, and a sense of control. And in such years, control becomes the most expensive product in the country. People don't want luxury. They want predictability. They don't want to be afraid of the next step. And those places where this feeling can be bought begin to attract money, business, and attention. Like a magnet. Now watch what happens on the other side. Areas where margins have disappeared are no longer feeding the normal economy. Not because people are suddenly different, but because they no longer have the resource to live slightly freely. And it is slightly free that creates most of the small purchases that hold storefronts, cafés, workshops, and local services. When this slightly odd is not present, the economy does not explode. It just starts to sound quieter. Quieter parking, quieter than the street, quieter life. And you can see it on the signs. Not necessarily bankruptcy, not necessarily a big statement, just for lease. And that's why this video is important. We won't make a horror story out of it. We will analyze the mechanism, why rich neighborhoods grow and shine and why everything else quietly empties. And most importantly, why is it happening at the same time, as if two different reality modes were turned on in the same country? Today, I will show you this step by step. First, where the money goes and why businesses choose some streets and abandon others. Then, housing as a filter that turns neighborhoods into a club based on the price of entry. Then, there's the labor market, where you don't need mass unemployment to make people afraid. And in the end, how it changes cities, service, security, migration, and the feeling that the country has become different even within the same state. Because the strangest thing about this paradox is that he's right there. It's not in the reports. It's on the next street. And if you learn to see how this two-speed system works America, you'll start to understand what's going on before the headlines without panicking, just with clarity. And we'll start with what always looks the most innocent, from the windows. From the moment when a normal neighborhood first notices, familiar places disappear. Because a showcase is not just a showcase. This is the district's thermometer. And when the thermometer starts showing colder, it's rarely because of one reason. This is almost always due to the fact that the money began to flow differently. Let's be honest, companies don't close stores because America is bad. They close stores because a particular point has stopped giving them what they consider to be the norm. Traffic, average receipts, predictability, low risk of losses and conflicts. And this is where the first reason for the rich neighborhoods paradox begins. In an affluent neighborhood, businesses have three things that will become almost a luxury in 2026. First, stable demand. Even if it has become more expensive for everyone to live, some people still have a margin. And this margin creates what keeps modern city storefronts afloat. Coffee, on the way, dinner, because you are tired, delivery, because you don't have the strength, services, because there is less time. This is not about wealth as show-offs. This is about wealth as a buffer. The second is low operational risk. In areas with less stress, there is less conflict, less theft, less chaos, and less unpredictability. And it sounds unpleasant, but for business, it's math. Where it's quieter, it's cheaper to work. Security, losses, insurance, staff turnover, breakdowns, complaints all cost money. When a business's margin is thinner, it goes to a place where there are fewer extra costs. The third density of correct traffic. In a rich neighborhood, people walk more often, are more likely to be in the flow, more often live in the I can go in mode. And I can go in is gold for the local economy. Because a huge part of the profit is made not on big plans but on small impulses. Now, let's look at the usual area where people's margins are disappearing. There's a process going on that seems insignificant at first. People start saving money not through drama, but through micro-solutions. This time, coffee is at home. Let's wait out the discounts until we order delivery. Instead of repairs, we will suffer for another month. Instead of a restaurant we are preparing, every decision is rational. But when it becomes massive, the neighborhood loses what makes it alive, the circulation of money, and that's when the storefronts start to empty. First go nice little things, shop, cafe, small service, then the average players leave, then there are only the most basic formats, cheap grocery, pawn shop, discount, everything that works on survival. And this is an important point. It's not the country that gets emptied, but specific zones get emptied. Therefore, rich streets can look brighter and brighter against the background of those that fade. It's the same system, just different speeds. When a neighborhood loses its stores and services, people are forced to continue driving. And this is where the chain begins, which many underestimate. Further means more time, more gas, more stress, less effort to live. And in 2026, people save not only money, they save energy. When there is less energy, people choose the shortest possible routes and minimal solutions. They stop making extra trips. They stop stopping by on the way. They stop walking without a goal. And this affects the area as an organism. Less movement, less blood. Rich neighborhoods, on the other hand, sell convenience within walking distance. It's getting closer, faster, and more comfortable there. There you can solve the problem in 15 minutes and not spend half a day. And that is why even those who are not ultra-rich start to reach out to such places, because they are not looking for luxury, but for reducing daily friction. Less friction equals less fatigue equals better quality of life. And that's why you see a strange picture. A new coffee shop and Pilates studio are opening in one area, and a regular pharmacy and clothing store are closing in another. Not because people are different, but because in one place people are still buying comfort, and in another they are already buying only necessity. Now, let's move on to housing, because housing makes this paradox almost inevitable. Expensive neighborhoods are becoming even more expensive, not just because it's beautiful, but because in conditions of uncertainty, people pay for the guarantee, for the feeling that the school will be normal, the street will be lit, services will work, the police will respond, infrastructure will be maintained, the area will be liquid. This is the club, and the entrance ticket is the price of the house or rental. Now, watch what's happening in the rest of America. The mortgage rate may drop slightly, but it doesn't bring back affordability, because accessibility is not a bid. It's a combination of home price payment taxes, insurance repairs, income assurance. And here's the catch. When the future seems less secure, people don't want to take on a heavy anchor, and this keeps many people in rent or waiting. But rents in desirable areas are also growing, because demand is pressing there. People want to live where there is less friction and more predictability. As a result, there is a division. Some areas become a magnet for those who can pay for peace of mind. Others turn into places where those who cannot buy a way out remain. And it doesn't sound pretty. But this is exactly how the filter works. When the entry price increases, the composition of the area changes, and everything changes with it. Business, services, security, culture, and people's behavior. Now, the important layer is work, because many people will say, if it was really bad, people would lose their jobs en masse. But the key point of 2026 is that you don't need mass unemployment to make the country feel fragile. 3 things are enough. The complexity of hiring. More interview stages, more pauses, more position frozen. Reduced mobility. People change jobs less, even if they are unhappy. Fear of error. People are afraid of steps that they used to take calmly, and that's where it connects to the rich neighborhoods paradox. When the market gets jittery, people start to value a safe environment. They stop taking risks. They choose areas where it is easier to accommodate children, where there are fewer problems, where there are more options. Those who can are moved there. Those who can't stay and feel even more pressure because the area around dries up. Again, rich neighborhoods don't look richer because they print money there, and because capital service, the best locations, business attention, and people who can pay for predictability flock there. Now, I want you to see this not as a theory, but as a picture. The assignment starts like this. At first, you notice that your favorite place has reduced its opening hours, because the store has fewer employees. Then the queues got longer because there was only one cashier for everyone. Then the service got rougher because people were tired, because prices in normal locations are growing faster, because businesses need to survive with less turnover. And then a very important psychological thing happens. People start to leave the house less. Not because they're lazy, but because the output is expensive. Money and nerves. And when people go out less, the area becomes less lively. And when the area is less lively, business is even worse off. And so the loop starts. Less traffic leads to less money, leads to less service, leads to less desire to go out, leads to even less traffic. And it looks so quiet that many do not notice the moment when normality has already disappeared. They just get used to the slightly worse than before background. Now, let's get back to the main paradox. When you see a rich neighborhood, you don't just see wealth. You can see the concentration of margin, the concentration of people who still have the space to make decisions. And when the margin disappears around you, any margin island looks like a showcase for success. Plus, there is a visual contrast effect. When nearby shopping streets become empty, any street that keeps up seems to be prosperous, even if she's just holding up better than the others. Finally, rich neighborhoods often follow a different logic. They adapt faster to new demand. There are hybrid formats, small boutiques, experience, services, subscription models. There are people who are willing to pay for life to remain comfortable, and this attracts new business. A city is not a building. The city is a service. Light, roads, garbage collection, police, firefighters, school, parks, repair, response to complaints. What we call normal life is almost entirely based on the fact that the city has the money and people to support it. And the city's money is taken from activity, taxes, sales, business turnover, real estate, permits, fines, service fees. And here's what happens when a neighborhood quietly empties out. Fewer stores, fewer sales, less taxes, less traffic, less small business, less working hours, less turnover, less new investment, worse infrastructure, less attractiveness. And in the first phase, you almost don't see it, because the authorities do the same thing that the family does. They go into maintenance mode. They do not close the city in one day. They start procrastinating, transfer, tighten it. At first, it looks reasonable. We will postpone repairs to the next quarter. We will freeze hiring. We will merge departments. We will reduce the opening hours of the institution. And that's how the urban version of crowding appears. Everything works, but worse. Everything is there, but slower. And this is where rich neighborhoods start to look even richer, because in affluent areas, activity doesn't drop so dramatically. There's still money going around. The tax base is higher there. It's easier to hold out there. There are fewer holes, and the city can maintain the quality of service at least at the same level. And in the weak areas, any delay becomes noticeable, because everything was already kept on a thin margin. There is a very simple test that people unconsciously do every day, not according to statistics, not based on reports. What does it feel like? Is it light in the evening? Is it clean? Is it being repaired quickly? Is it safe to go? Are services responding? Do schools/clubs/libraries work? If the answers start to gradually worsen, people get the feeling the city has become different. And this is important. The transition rarely looks dramatic. It looks like an accumulation of small things. You notice that road holes live longer, garbage is cleaned worse, the waiting list at the clinic has become longer, and social programs have been reduced. There are more problems at school. People are more annoyed. And that's when economics turns into psychology, because the quality of the environment is the main factor that determines how much a person is willing to tolerate high prices and stress. Many people are willing to pay more if the environment is reliable, but no one wants to pay more for an environment that is falling apart. And here we come to the most dangerous part of the two speeds. Rich neighborhoods don't just become rich, they become safe havens, and the rest of the neighborhoods start to be perceived as a risk zone. Let's be very careful. Security is complex. It depends on statistics, media, visibility, density of people, neighborhood culture, police, and thousands of factors. But there is one thing that is almost always stable. When people have less margin and more stress, social friction increases. This is not necessarily a crime explosion. Sometimes it's more minor conflicts, more aggression, more theft for small things, more vandalism, more of a sense of chaos. And the business feels it instantly. And that's where the scary rational logic comes in. If the neighborhood gets more nervous, the business leaves or puts prices higher to cover the risks. If the business leaves, the area becomes less vibrant. If the area is less lively, it becomes even more nervous. And again, the loop. And rich neighborhoods get the opposite effect. There is more security, more cameras, more attention, more political will to maintain quality. And this reinforces the feeling of, it's safer there even more. This is where the big change of 2026 is born. People are starting to look at the U.S. as a menu of options, but not by ideology. On three things: the cost of living, security/quality of the environment, availability of work, and migration looks very routine, not escape, and excel. Rent/mortgage, taxes, car insurance, housing insurance, utilities, kindergarten, gasoline, distance, schools. And here's the important thing: people don't migrate to richer places. They migrate to a place where you can monitor your budget without constant anxiety. Therefore, a paradox arises. Sometimes people leave the rich state not because it is bad there, but because it has become too expensive to be calm there. And this explains why rich neighborhoods can look richer at the same time that many people feel poorer. Rich neighborhoods are a concentration of those who can stand the price of peace of mind. The rest live in cramped conditions. You're asking, how is it that there is fatigue around and there are new restaurants, new houses, new boutiques? Because these zones have a rare characteristic. They become a safe asset in the human sense. Not just for the investor, but for the family. Money flows where there is less risk. Business flows where there is less lost service flows, where there is solvency. People flow where there is predictability. And it looks like prosperity. But often it's not prosperity. This is concentration, like water that leaves the soil and gathers in one place. From the outside, it seems everything is blooming there. But in fact, it's just getting drier in other places. The most dangerous thing in this story is not the closing of stores or the mortgage rate. The most dangerous loss of movement. When the system works well, a person has a feeling. I can go to the best, I can change my job, I can move, I can start again, I can make mistakes and recover. And when it disappears, there's a feeling of, I'm stuck. And this feeling of being stuck is the fuel for everything. Irritation, polarization, fatigue, distrust, anger, apathy, because a person can endure difficulties if he sees the way up. But when the path is not visible, difficulties become a personal prison. And here it is important to put the point correctly. Because the rich neighborhoods paradox, this is not about envy and not about morality. This is not a rich are bad story. This is a story about mechanics. When the system becomes less predictable, money and people start behaving the same way. They look for a place where the risk is less. And at this point, rich neighborhoods start to look richer, not because the country is better off, but because the country is more uneven. It's like the light in a room that didn't get any brighter, it just shifted. One corner is now bright, warm, neat, new storefronts and new cars, and in the other corner it's quieter, emptier, less service, more annoying, and more of a we're on our own here feeling. And the most unpleasant part, this difference is not always immediately visible in numbers. It is first visible in the rhythm, in how quickly the streets are repaired, in how long for lease hangs. It's how many people around you look tired. The way conversations have changed is less we plan and more we stick around. Because the real gap isn't just about income. The real gap is the margin of life. Some people still have it: time, energy, reserve, the opportunity to make mistakes. For others, it is almost non-existent. Any deviation becomes a problem. Any decision becomes a risk. Any later becomes a debt. And that's why elite zones are growing. This is not a holiday. This is concentration. The system gathers those who can pay for predictability in one place and makes these places even more secure. And the rest of the districts remain living in the crowded economy 2 mode, where there are no explosions and wear and tear occurs. And here's the question that honestly ends this story. If rich neighborhoods become safe havens, what happens to the rest? They're starting to lose more than just stores. They start to lose movement. And when a society loses momentum, it changes faster than the news can explain. Therefore, the main conclusion of this video is simple. America does not collapse in one day. America is rebuilding and doing so at 2 speeds. And if you want to understand what happens next, look not at the big headlines, but at where predictability appears and where it disappears. Write in the comments, do you see it in yourself? Is your neighborhood getting brighter or quieter? Which changes more, housing, services, security, or work? And if you want to continue, the next part will be about why rich areas can look richer even when the economy is seemingly normal. We will analyze the mechanism of hidden subsidies, insurance, taxes, infrastructure, loans, and how exactly they fix the 2 speeds. Subscribe so you don't miss it.